Stand up for Jesus. We were quite a religious family on my father's side. My mother's family were Church of England, if they were anything. It didn't seem to figure very largely in their lives. We were Methodist and lived next door to the chapel. In fact, we nearly lived in it. Father was the organist, Sunday school teacher, general handyman and fixer, and in the winter, the boiler man. My mother cleaned the chapel, and an uncle was the society steward who took and counted the collection and welcomed the ministers and local preachers. Grandfather Albert had collected another denomination. He had been the Salvation Army bandmaster of a corps in the nearby mining village. He was very musical, could play several instruments, read music and write arrangements for the band, and had conducted massed bands at the Crystal Palace, Sydenham Gardens. Albert was always happy to show his faded formal photographs of these events to guests or travelling salesmen who, for some reason, never showed the same enthusiasm as Albert, who could recite the names of those long-dead bandsmen as if they were present and ready to blow for him just one more time. Sundays were particularly onerous for me. There were services both morning and evening, with Sunday school sandwiched in after lunch, which we called dinner, and then communion after the evening service. Breaking of bread was the phrase used by older members of the congregation. One lay preacher used to refer to the morning service as the edification of saints, and the evening service as for the redemption of sinners. It was not surprising that I was somewhat confused as to where I fitted in. Occasionally, Grandfather would make a Sunday evening request that brightened up the day for me. "Clifford," he would say on returning from evening service, "I would very much like to go to the Army service tonight." This would mean a trip to the Salvation Army Citadel in central Bristol. Father would work out whether he had enough petrol. It was rationed, so did he have enough coupons? Taking the trip would mean that I would get to stay up late. Only the men of our family went, and my grandfather and I would be issued with blankets and a flask of tea to keep us warm on the journey home. The Austin Ruby 7, circa 1936, whimpered into life, and off went the three of us to the central citadel, where the service had already started. For me, this was a show business version of Christianity. A big band, lots of singing, choruses, hallelujahs, and songs sung over again just because they liked them. Then knee drill. How I loved the Army's phraseology. Grandfather was tall, over 6 feet, but rather stooped, and he sometimes used 2 sticks for support. His entrance would always be noticed. Many old friends and comrades would be there. At some point in the service there would be testimonies, when comrades would stand and tell how they came to know the Lord. "Give us a testimony, Albert," would come a shout, followed by hallelujahs and other warm, encouraging calls. Grandfather would rise slowly, raise his hand like a benediction and say, "Brothers and sisters, I've made a long journey to be with you tonight." More hallelujahs. It would be some time before he slowly lowered himself to his seat, amid murmurings of good cheer, the army equivalent of applause. Grandfather's funeral was probably the last in the village, where the mourners walked behind the hand-pushed bier which held his coffin. The procession went from the chapel to the churchyard, the length of the high street. Passing vehicles stopped, and engines turned off. The villagers stood with heads bowed, and curtains in the houses would be drawn as the bier approached. His death was my first experience of a real and irreplaceable loss. Some 50 years later, on a return to the village, I was introduced to a very old lady who looked at me long and quizzically. "My," she said, "you're the very image of Albert."